When we're looking at those things, we're really looking at those practices or interventions that really have been studied a lot and proven to be successful for youth in the juvenile justice system.
Jackson County Juvenile Justice offers a restorative practices approach that not only looks at the needs of the youth, but the victim, family, and community all together. It covers evidence-based practices from a punitive system to a restorative approach and trauma-informed care. So please explain evidence-based practices.
So evidence-based practices and interventions are based on research and studies that have been done to see what the effectiveness of those programs or interventions are. So a lot of programs go through that and aren't found to be effective. And so when we're looking at those things, we're really looking at those practices or interventions that really have been studied a lot and proven to be successful for youth in the juvenile justice system. So not being rearrested, performing better at school, making better decision making, those type of things. And so some of the specific things we do in terms of our practice, we have what's called Effective Practices in Community Supervision, EPICS. And so that's a structured format that our probation officers use when they meet with youth. And so it goes through a check-in period where they're just checking in with the youth in terms of how things are going at home, school, if they're doing treatment. They'll review from their last meeting in terms of what they talked about and how they practiced some things. And then they'll go into an intervention, so skill development in terms of those. So they'll use those evidence-based pieces on communication skills, decision-making, peer relations, things like that. So they'll kind of role play in terms of doing some scenarios and work through those. And then the last piece is they'll assign homework. And so as the youth departs and goes back out into the community is to really practice those skills. So the next time they're with peers and they maybe want to do something that's illegal, then to use those decision-making skills to get out of that situation. So it's a good model that's proven to be effective in terms of really focusing on what to talk about through that meeting. Interventions would be things such as either individual or group that you could do on communication skills, anger management, building healthy relationships, and those are conducted either through our probation staff or our detention and residential programs in more of a group setting. So really to build positive skills in youth that they can use out in the community when they're interacting with their families and other peers, really to look at those things. So really to focus on what has been proven to be effective versus just what we may think may work with the youth. And so really to look at those studies and that research and make sure we're focusing in on those things. It also is cost effective in terms of really putting our resources into things that work versus things that may not work. And so really looking at those pieces. Another piece I would say too is looking at our risk levels of youth. So the risk of additional criminal behavior. So the lower risk kids, we should not be mixing with our higher risk kids. That's a evidence practice not to do that. So we really have worked hard not to mix those groups and really to look at the risk levels when we're assigning them to different groups or activities through either probation or diversion agreement.
How would you describe the movement from a punitive system to a restorative approach?
Long ago, we really just would focus on the youth and what can we do to punish that youth for the criminal activities they've done. And so that really is not effective. And again, that kind of goes back to the effective use of resources and things. So really we've looked at how can we make it more of a restorative process. And so really not only focus on the youth, but also include the victim, the family, and the community as a whole. And so really looking at those things of how do we repair the harm that's been done by the youth's criminal behavior or just behaviors in general. And so like for a victim, we've done face-to-face victim and youth meetings. And so the victim's able to share how that harm has impacted them. Maybe it's caused some traumatic situations in their life too, depending on what the offense is. And then also maybe with the family of how the youth's criminal behavior has affected them. Parents having to take time off work to meet with probation officers, come to court, attend other family sessions, and then the community as a whole. So to kind of give back to the community in terms of those. So community service projects, cleaning up graffiti. We've partnered with the Medford Police Department, or we take out our own work crews in terms of cleaning up litter and graffiti. We do our own landscaping around our building. So really giving back on those. So really to look at not can we just punish this youth for what they've done, but how can we give them better skills so they make better decisions in the future, so they don't continue to commit crimes. They go to school, they follow their parents' rules. They maybe pull their friends that are on that fringe back into doing positive things and have those outlets as well.
Do you see a high success rate with the restorative approach as compared to just a punitive system approach?
We do. I mean, it's really based on building relationships, and so really that's really what draws kids in. Versus punishing would just put kids in detention. I mean, that would just be punishing them, and that's really proven not to be effective. You can hold kids accountable and still use detention, but you've also got to give them those additional skills, and then also include others in kind of their plan in terms of how to make things whole again for what they've done.
Can you tell us what trauma-informed care is?
That's kind of new to juvenile justice, and it's still a work in progress. And so we've really looked at how can we be more informed about the youth that we're dealing with, or even the families. And so every youth that comes in and sees a probation officer, we have them do a ACEs, so Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a checklist in terms of trauma, in terms of looking at past abuse, maybe drug and alcohol use, some traumatic events in terms of with a family of divorce or parents that are in prison or jail. So really looking at those things of what trauma does a youth already come in with and be aware of that. So kids that come through our detention or residential programs, we do more of a mental health screening that includes trauma as well. So just again, that awareness. We've trained all of our staff in that, and we really look at those things of passing it on to our mental health staff we work with as well. So if kids have a higher number of ACEs scores, and so it's 1 to 10, so 10's high, and really that's designed for adults that have already gone through being a kid. And so if kids are already having all of those traumatic experiences, what can we do to really look at that of how we serve them? So probation staff work through their epics in terms of working one-on-one with kids on some of those skills. Our detention facility, we've looked at how can we make our kind of, the lockup a little bit more trauma-informed. And so we've provided in each of the youth rooms, one whole wall we've done chalkboard paint. And so they can write and draw to help with that coping mechanism when they do spend time in their room. We also have added music to all of the rooms to help with that coping. And then at night, they can have earplugs or an eye mask. There's a lot of different sounds that occur in detention at night, and for some kids that's very traumatic in terms of reliving some of those experiences. And the best way to help cope with that is get a good night's sleep too, so they're ready to go for the next day. So we're still working on some things in terms of that. Our residential program, we have a guitar and a keyboard program. So again, some of those positive coping mechanisms that kids can use as well.
How would you rate your level of fulfillment or sense of purpose while working in this job?
I've been in the juvenile field for my whole career, 30 years, with Jackson County 25, and I always have that hope in kids. And so in terms of learning more about traumatic experiences or even what's most effective, I think that just improves on that in terms of that hope that kids can make that change. It may not happen right as they're with us, but down the road, in terms of understanding those and building the positive relationships too. I think that's a big, huge thing where if kids feel safe, they're able to share and understand more as well. So yeah, I think that, I continue to have that hope even after 30 years, and I plan on continuing to have it as well.